Okay, good morning. Welcome back. I hope that you've been having a good weekend and enjoying the single-digit degrees we've been having the last day or two. It's been dry, but if you get work and you find yourself traveling or unable to safely come to campus, let me know and I will send you a Zoom link for that class if it's not a speaking day. So do what you need to take care of yourself. I know this is a difficult time, and I appreciate your engagement and participation in class. So what we'll be doing today and Wednesday is giving you the opportunity to do some additional prep work for the celebratory speech. Think about the expectations for this speech, some of the ways that you can apply the skills that we've been talking about into developing an effective and well-organized speech. So I'll be giving 3 different examples of celebratory speeches in class today, asking you to discuss and note some of the things about them in groups, and then we'll talk about them together as examples of the types of speeches that you'll be able to develop for this class. So last class, we had a full debrief of the partner introduction speech. Again, your grades and feedback have been given orally right after your presentation, but also posted to Canvas. I encourage you, if you were not here last Friday, to take a look at the slides from last class, including the feedback on the partner speeches. Again, some of the things people did really well were providing good examples, using things like introductions to really hook us and get us engaged. Things to continue working on are filling out the speech time, right? Working on adding from the outline when sharing content in the speech, and working on providing really clear signposting between your main points, which we'll be discussing a little bit more today. In addition to that, last Friday, we discussed the celebratory speech. I also posted the speaking schedule. Again, I did my best to honor what you all had in the Google form for your availability. So please, please, please give the speaking schedule a look. I'll be posting it again in just a minute, and it's on Canvas. And if you do anticipate a conflict on the day that you're scheduled to speak, let me know. The first celebratory speeches are on Friday, so they are coming up. And again, I've tried to shuffle things around so that if you spoke early for the first speech, you're going to speak later for this one, and vice versa. And that'll continue to change to help to even things out. I know that if you spoke later, maybe you had a bit of an advantage since you listened to some of the feedback earlier and seen some other speeches. So that'll continue to be shuffled around to help to balance out for everybody. All right, before we get started, any questions about anything we discussed last class? Anything in general that's on your mind? Great. So I want to just reiterate some of the things about the celebratory speech. We'll be looking at some good example speeches in groups and talking about how we use introductions, conclusions, and transition sentences effectively when developing these kinds of speeches. So if you were not here on Friday or you need a quick refresher, the celebratory speech is 4 to 5 minutes long, and you get the choice between one of these 3 options. You could either give a commencement speech. If you're doing that, we'll be looking at an example today, and I also encourage you to look up examples online. There's a lot of video examples you can see. There are both student speakers. These are people who have been chosen, perhaps like a valedictorian, or somebody who has competitively been selected to represent the student body, or received a prestigious scholarship, right? Those are folks that are oftentimes selected for those kinds of speeches. There are also celebrities who might be asked to give a commencement speech as a guest speaker, right? We see a lot of famous figures who are called upon to do that, like Oprah, and those can be helpful, but I think a little bit less aligned with what we're looking for here, right? Because you are speaking as a student rather than as an external guest. The number 2, right, toast or roast for the year 2022. I'll be providing an example of an after dinner or humorous speech that I think does a good job of helping to align with what you might expect from this type of speech. Again, think about it as offering a tribute of sorts to the previous year. And then the scholarship, right, is an example of an acceptance style of speech. Should still be in the 45-minute range, but more focused on you accepting the award, acknowledging gratitude, discussing what the award means to you, and so on. We'll be looking at an example of an acceptance speech too that I think does a great job of succinctly describing and sharing those components. And again, as I offered last week, if you have an idea for something that you feel would work really well as a celebratory speech that is not one of these options and you're really excited about it, let me know, email me your pitch or meet with me in office hours, and we can discuss if that's a good option for you. Again, the celebratory speech schedule, right? So it is coming up soon. So the first speakers that we have for this Friday are Alofa, Michaela, Natanya, Chris, Ella, and Alexander. So we have a total of 4 different speaking days. So we'll be doing it Friday and all of next week. Email me if you know that you have a conflict on any of those days. Either way, just like last time, I'll ask that you print out an outline ahead of time, one for yourself and one for me, and hand that in as you're giving the speech. Like last time, I'll offer some feedback. And like before, I'll have folks in class complete peer review as a way of evaluating and responding to the speeches that you're hearing. And again, like before, I'll be posting, or I'll be giving you the opportunity to post your names on that whiteboard for your speaking order. So that's what's coming up. Later today, I'll post the full rubric and breakdown for this speech. Very similar to the partner speech. I'm looking at the same 4 things: your use of content, your use of organization, your use of delivery, and your use of outline. So I'll be looking at those 4 things again and applying that to the celebratory speech genre. Again, as a quick review, we talked about a lot of different types of celebratory speeches in class, right? These can be both recognition, you're introducing somebody, perhaps you have a guest speaker that you're tasked with introducing, or presenter in a group context. You might be accepting something, just one of the examples you can use. Speeches praise or blame, a toast or roast, right, as a tribute to a person or a thing, in this case, a year. Inspiration or encouragement, things such as rallies, commemorative speeches, and so on, are designed to enlighten us in the moment. And something like a eulogy, right, is mourning a loss, helping us to move on. I thought that would be a little bit dark for this class, but this is a good example of a celebratory speaking style if this is one that you're interested in doing and you have an idea for. So what I'm going to have us do is look at these 3 different examples of what I think are effective celebratory speeches. And after each of these speeches, I'm going to ask you in groups to take some time to discuss and have one person in your group write or type for your attendance credit for the day, your responses to the following. First of all, what did you all find effective about this speech? You'll take some time to discuss and note some of the things here that you felt went really well. Second of all, from what we've talked about in class in terms of its focus on the present, in terms of its focus on celebration or censure, its focus on gathering and relating to emotions in the moment, how did you all feel that the speech fulfilled the genre? And lastly, what were some key ideas that you picked up on from this speech? So I'll ask you to share and write in your groups, and then I'll ask a couple groups to share some of their ideas to the class, and then we'll keep moving down the line to the next speech. So as far as groups go, let's go ahead and do a group of 5 over here on this side with this cluster of tables. We'll go ahead and do a group of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 over here. We'll do a group of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Over here, do a group of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 in toward the back. So take some time, move a little bit closer in toward your groups. Again, I'll be sharing a video asking you all to discuss and write some of the things you're noticing from that video, and then we'll talk about it together. Everybody in their groups? Okay. So our first speech is a commencement speaker. It was a student speaker who was selected to give a commencement speech at the University of Utah in the year 2020. I thought it was a good example both of thinking about the moment and the unique constraints of that moment, as well as the speakers sharing their story and experience in a meaningful way that I think connects really well to how you might give a speech for this class.
Good evening, President Watkins, distinguished guests, Mr. John Warnock, faculty, and fellow students of the class of 2020. I would first and foremost like to offer you a resounding congratulations. Milestones of great magnitude are always worth celebrating, regardless of circumstance. But they're also sobering, and even more so now. What this moment means for each of us moving forward cannot be overstated. As such, I've determined that this is the best time to have a little talk with you about hermit crabs. Now, I had a small hermit crab army as a kid, and one of the coolest things about them to me was the fact that throughout their lives, they're constantly changing their shells. Shell changing process sounds simple. Hermit crab grows until it begins to feel tight and uncomfortable, and then it leaves that shell to find a new one that's better. The problem is that being without a shell is described by scientists as being stressful for the crabs, and it is as worrying as it is dangerous. Those shells are not only their places of comfort, but also their protection, their shield from the precariousness of the world. Until a crab finds a new shell that can accommodate its growth, it is vulnerable. Admittedly, at times I have felt a lot like a hermit crab. Probably the most powerful instance of this occurring in my life took place at my first university. I did not come into U as a bright-eyed freshman. And when I entered that school, I had the same shell I had worn for most of my life, as I'm sure many of us did when we stepped foot on our first campus, be it the U or elsewhere. But over time, new experiences and realizations caused me to grow, and I began to feel uncomfortable in that same old shell. But where I was not allowed to leave it. That shell was the one I had been accepted in, and unless I wanted to endure some pretty serious backlash, it was the only one I needed to wear. And I tried. I tried to keep myself small, but I couldn't suffocate forever. I decided to risk the vulnerability of living without a shell until I could find one that would hold the version of me into which I had grown. Long story short, that is why the University of Utah is held so dearly in my heart. When I came here, I came on the heels of discouragement and punishment. And when I arrived, I was met with acceptance. I took faith. And all of you, professors, our connections in our culture, you got me. There are as many University of Utah experiences as there are students at the school, but if your experience here has been anything like mine, then the shedding of our shells has been celebrated rather than suppressed. And the various opportunities and spirit of the youth have encouraged you to grow as much and in as many ways as possible. If your experience here has been anything like mine, you have always had somebody in your corner. Seeing as we're humans and not hermit crabs, the shells we have had to leave do not look like shells. For some, they look like friendships or relationships. For some, they look like choices that do not actually fit with who we are. For some, they have looked like closets. Our shells, however, are not always led voluntarily, and many things have forced us to grow more quickly than we had anticipated. Horrendous tragedies have broken our hearts. Disappointment and frustration have plagued our conversations. We have reached for each other in times of fear and held each other in moments of weakness. These things have taught us how to move forward when we weren't ready to leave our shell. As new graduates, we expect to be in a position of uncertainty about the future, but none of us could have expected that this occasion would call for the individual and collective strength that it now has. That in mind, I would like to finish my remarks with the same sentiment I intended to convey before our plans for this day turned upside down. As we part from each other and from this university, it is my hope that we always find the self-respect to recognize when our shells are too small, and the courage to move through uncertainty onto a better fit. Be honest about whether you are allowing yourself to expand. If you find that you are not, then you understand that the vulnerability you display while you search for your shell is not weakness, but perfect growth. It is additionally an act of ultimate care for others to understand that growth is not up to us. We do not get to decide when or how the people in our life grow. in order to get to determine what is right for the ones they have. The best thing we can do as friends, as partners, and as people is to value empathy and acceptance more than we value the status quo. It has been a pleasure and an honor to grow with all of you and to have felt your support and often my encouragement. I may have taught you more about hermit crabs today than you wanted to know, but you have taught me, without a shadow of a doubt, that the class of 2020 is intelligent, empathetic, brave, and resilient. Please continue to carry those strengths with you wherever you go from here, to whichever shell you choose next. Seek out the ones that will hold all that you are and do not make yourself small. We are called the mighty Utah students for a reason, and that is not something you leave behind when you close this chapter. Remember that.
Okay. So now that your group has had the chance to hear this speech, take some time to discuss and have one person write or type for your group. What was effective about this speech? How did this speech fulfill the genre of celebratory speaking? And what were some key ideas that you picked up from this speech? We'll give you about 4 or 5 minutes to discuss this, and we'll talk about it together.
You got it. Thank you. You got it. Okay, then Ferris, you're entering that first question. Oh, no. Yeah. The grades of comparison. Oh, you got it? All right. Oh, no. The first one. She does this thing. Like the overall message is like. It's really necessary. But we'll.
It's like the balance of
The big about her, she kind of made it about the class itself. Her personal story. Yeah.
Your group's a couple more minutes to discuss the speech.
Not to be confined towards this control. Yes.
So I can tell there's a lull in the conversation, so let's come back together here. So this commencement speech, let's talk first about what we noticed that was effective about this speech. So this group up here toward the front, what were some things that you all talked about and noticed as effective in this speech? Yeah.
So, interesting story. Which was a segue.
Yeah, what kind of parts of that speech did you notice that really stood out? What were the things in that story that really resonated?
Well, we specifically like the hermit crabs.
Yeah,
That really like got my attention. That's in theater, but where she like draw you in like hermit crabs. That's kind of even kind of a funny topic.
yeah,
So, so it's fun to say.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but also like it went into like her analogy of being like safe and with the crab with your shell, and then you brought that into growth where if you're not able to grow with the protective shell on, you have to like shed that and form a different shell.
Yeah,
So it was really great analogy and put it in perspective of your kind of frame of mind and
yeah,
imagination as well. Because you can picture yourself as a hermit crab growing out of your shell, having to go flying or maybe.
yeah. So, thanks, Chris. These are really great points here about how the framing device of the speech, the recurring use of hermit crabs, bringing hermit crabs up, was used really effectively, right? Coming in as a biology major and somebody with expertise in an area that probably isn't going to be relatable to most students. He found a way to make that really resonate and use it as a metaphor in a way that connected really well, right? One thing for you to think about if you're thinking about this type of speech is to think about how you can take your interest, your area, your field, what it is that you're focusing on, whether it's your extracurriculars or athletics, or perhaps it's your major or an area of interest of you, and making it something that's relatable or interesting and engaging to other people who might not have the same background or interest in the topic, right? If she can do it, right, I think about hermit crabs, I think there's a great way that you can find that same kind of framing. Perhaps you're a history major and you're really interested in examining Indigenous history, and there's a story or narrative that you keep coming back to about how Indigenous populations talk about their own history and experience that you can relate to your own experience as a student, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can use your own background, your expertise, show us a slice of yourself in this type of genre. Let's hear from the group back here. How did you all see this fitting the genre of celebratory speaking?
We said that the overall message was positive and provided inspiration, and that it was tailored towards like 2020 graduate class of University of Utah.
Yeah. So having a positive kind of uplifting tone, I think is important, right? If you're about to graduate, sometimes you get some hard truths, but it's meant to be exciting, it's meant to motivate you, it's meant to help you to prepare for what's next, right? And I chose this speech in part because it happened in 2020, right? COVID had hit and a lot of things were moved remotely, including that speech. We had a speaker who was trying to acknowledge and speak to the challenges of moving into that environment, right? I graduated in 2020. We did not have a graduation celebration or walk, right? So that was a constraint that happened in that moment that I feel like the speaker was accounting for as well. And then over here on this side, what were some key ideas you all
Just like, she wanted to make sure everybody felt like they could become who they're supposed to be without upset, and then just like to leave your comfort zone, not be afraid to change.
Yeah, and I think part of, as you're bringing up, part of what makes that story maybe a lot of sense. The one thing just to be lectured and told, break out of your shell, do something on your own. But when she has her own story coming from a previous institution that was not the right fit, was not the right shell, right? It makes that story and experience feel a lot more compelling. If you have an example or story or narrative that helps to back up what it is that you're sharing to that audience, that can really enhance the speech and the main ideas here. So I think a good example here of a commencement speech, if you choose that style of speaking, pay attention to how you can draw upon your own expertise. Think about how you can use examples, framing, and so on that's useful. be talking more about transitions in a minute, but one thing that I really like about this speech is how she uses the metaphor of the hermit crab as a way of physically transitioning and verbally transitioning between her points. So she would say, you know, in the past, I had my own shell that I had to shed, and she used that to start to talk about her past experience, right? So be thinking about how you can use those type of transition sentences as a way of signposting clearly where you're going between your main points. All right, so speech number 2 comes from us locally. So we have the an example of an after dinner speech that comes from a speech champion delivered at the high school speech and debate state championship in Monmouth, Oregon. This is a speaker, Megan, who is talking about sort of self-love and experiences of challenge. There is kind of as content warning, some discussions surrounding mental health, mental well-being. But I do think this is a great example here of how this type of genre in a more humorous or light context, similar to a toast or roast, can be used too.
My name's Megan Cox, and I just realized I don't know what to do with my hands when I talk. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Can I restart? Thanks. And just judge ready, get your pen ready. Talk too fast, unorganized, overacting, over enthusiastic, miracle she made it final. It's not funny. Basically, all you need to write. Sit back, relax, so that it enjoy the clean things all over. Simply speech in the picture. It's not. And the more we hear it, the more we start to believe it. Today, I'll be talking about my attributes. One I saw those attributes as flaws, why they are positive nonetheless. Now, I haven't had a long personal struggle with self-image. But maybe you're a teenage girl, the most confident people in our society. I know. I'm just so always like this. Like at one point, I was just a kid eating balloon chef ranch every night. 7th grade was a nice time. Next thing I know, my good health God was like, so jewelry, so I don't know. In your mirror, you don't see just a kid. I see a good community. So I'm kidding you. Amen. Suddenly, all my flaws became apparent, but not in the way you think. Because when God helped me with hormones, He also helped me in every single one of middle school hormones. And when hormonal teenagers start to feel insecure, the best way for them to combat that insecurity is to make other people feel insecure. And what better way to make feel insecure than a 5'11" 7th grader who really thought she could pull off high school? So I'm trying to give you this message today. To love yourself. That's our people shouldn't. It's let's talk about what I found fun. Humor.
laughing/agreeing with someone self-deprecating humor. This is great. Let me introduce myself. My name is Megan Hoffman, with Knox Super Touch Store with 400 overall. Well, today roll with Uma Thurman knows. My hair is greasier than a McDonald's hamburger, and I have been told by a medical professional that if treated properly, a small child will come into my house. So much more than that. Because beyond the physical flaws, I have very deep-seated emotional flaws. Strong, independent woman, I work 5 more months today. Probably 5 after the ground over. Relationship with a precocious and emotionally unstable ADSer, and I am single, ready to awkwardly mingle and trustee Pringles. He will accept for you. Him black hat, yeah. Can't regard that low end. Please don't. Here's my hand. This is good. I mean, this feels good. I mean, I told Joe, you guys are laughing, probably more at me than with me, but it's good. Honestly, I'm just happy to be here today talking about what I'm talking about. Because there was a point where I couldn't even look in the mirror, nonetheless talk about my idiosyncrasies on Bruce Radio. One of which being that I use words like idiosyncrasy. It got really bad. I lost myself in what people were saying about me, and I allowed my flaws until one day somebody came up to me. She said, "Hey Megan, I think you're funny and pretty." True story. Savannah Marcus after softball practice, November 18th, 2016. Hey Megan, pretty. I thought, you know what? You're right. And I know with 38% chance she was making fun of me, but that's not the point. The point is that day I stopped listening to the negative things people said about me and I started to listen to positive. Savannah Marcus helped change the way I do myself. Hi, my name is Megan Cox and I'm a Knox Super Touch Store who is funny and pretty. And when I could take the things people were saying about me out of their negative connotations, I could see they weren't really flaws at all. Hi, my name is Megan Cox, and I'm a Knox Super Touch Store because I like school and I like learning and I would like to talk about my passions because that's what makes me successful and that's okay. Even if Knox Super Touch. Myself, and that was easy. Self-love is hard, but that was easy. Thank you, Peter. I didn't want to earlier next cliche. I couldn't like your hat. Also, I totally joking about the nomination to be on. Thank you, thank you. Great. Let's go out there and create that environment. So I very confidently raised my glass myself. Because I am a Knox Super Touch Store who is funny and great. I also raised this glass on either. Because from what I can assume about a group of teenagers spending their weekend at a forensics tournament, you are all uncle nerds who favorite titles in an indie movie.
So ADS stands for after dinner speaking. So that's the speech competition format that she was competing in. Take some time to move back to your groups and discuss some of the things you noticed about this speech. Again, it kind of fitting a toast type of speech, a celebration focused in the moment, perhaps focused on her and her flaws and her experiences, the way you might similarly tribute the year 2022.
What you guys think?
I really like that she's like awkward, but outgoing, like, outgoing is like, what we want to be on this. And presentation, I think it's has to like, come forward. Yeah. I'm supposed to read.
I felt like it was very like lucid and Max, but it was also. Normal, I guess, at the same time.
Give your group a couple more minutes to discuss.
Yeah, very, emotional fun.
What key ideas do you get from this?
Looks like there's a bit of a lull here, so let's chat about this together. So let's start with this group over here. What did you all notice that was effective about this? Yeah, so having enthusiasm, energy, right? You don't need to be cracking jokes every second or be doing silly things with the microphone or your hands in that degree. But the way that she was interested and the way that she had the repetition of the phrase, "Hi, I'm Megan Cox, I'm awkward," and like rephrase the sentence over the course of the speech to match her overall speech purpose of talking about self-love, I thought was really effective and did a good job of helping us see that progression as the speech itself progressed. So a good example here of how using a point and repeating that point can be really clear. It's something we'll remember, right? Even if we don't remember all of the details of the speech. How about here on the side, what did you notice with regard to genre? Something like self-love or self-esteem is very present focused. How we feel about ourselves in the moment, not who we could be, not who we've been, but who we are right now, works really well in that genre. And then how about here in the middle? What were some key ideas that you all picked up on?
Well, she really talked a lot about self-love. In a good environment.
Mhm.
When we on her flaws. She really focused on overcoming and achieving and uplifting.
Mhm.
She even attributed some of her achievements to other people.
Mhm.
Whole thing felt pretty personal.
Yeah. And we use humor a lot as a defense mechanism in those situations, right? We oscillate between sharing maybe a personal detail, like that story about the friend who liked her and said positive things about her, with humor, like maybe she was being sarcastic, right? So oftentimes in more humorous or celebratory genre, right, we will use comedy as a way of helping things go down easier, right? If it was all like hard truths at all moments, it might not have made sense in that genre or situation. But using levity to break things up and combine it with this more serious points is something that I think can be done effectively in this type of genre. So Everything Everywhere All at Once was my favorite movie of 2022, and probably one of my favorite movies ever. And I wanted to show the Golden Globes were a couple weeks ago. The best supporting actor who was from that film, who gave a really great acceptance speech. He was also in the Temple of Doom Indiana Jones movie as a child actor. So it's a very short speech, but I think does a great job of using that time effectively. So I wanted to share this one as well.
Wow. Thank you so much. I was raised to never forget where I came from and to always remember who gave me my first opportunity. I'm so happy to see Steven Spielberg here tonight. Steven, thank you. When I started my career as a child actor in Indiana Jones and a couple of years, I felt so very lucky to have been chosen. As I grew older, I started to wonder if that was it, if that was just luck. For so many years, I was afraid I had nothing more to offer. That no matter what I did, I would never surpass what I achieved as a kid. Thankfully, more than 30 years later, two guys thought of me. They remember that kid. And they gave me an opportunity to try again. Everything I have said has been unbelievable. Dan Kwan, Daniel Shiner, thank you so much for helping me find my answer. You have given me more than I could have ever hoped. Thank you to the Hollywood Foreign Press Association for this incredible honor. Thank you to A24, Layline Entertainment, and ACBO. Thank you to our incredible producer, Jonathan Wong. Thank you to Michelle Yeoh, Jamie Lee Curtis, Stephanie Hsu, and our entire EEAAO family. And last but not least, I want to thank the most important person in my life, the one person that never stopped believing in me. My wife, Echo, I love you with all my heart. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So wholesome content of the day. So we're getting a little bit short on time, so I won't have us return for this one, but a few things that you might have noticed, and a few things to pick up on this one, right? One thing that an acceptance speech can do really effectively is frame the past and also frame the present. So talking about his experience as a child actor growing up, but feeling like he was never really given a full chance, I felt like was done really well in combination with discussing in the present the people that he was grateful to. If you decide to do an acceptance speech, you might think about who you want to reach out to and thank, right? That's something that's able to be included in your outline and something that'll really help refer back to as you're giving the speech, right? The use of framing it as a story of a narrative of overcoming a challenge, I felt like worked really well here, right? We're feeling very happy for him because he had this success, especially in light of challenges. People put faith in him, and expressing that gratitude, that faith, and the significance of receiving that award, I think was really clear, again, in that very short period of time. So Again, a good example here of an acceptance speech. There are a lot of bad acceptance speeches out there that are way too long. They use the music to cut over them. But in terms of hitting the points that it needed to, this is a great example of how you could use this genre as well in your celebratory speech. So as we're thinking about the speech and some of the things that you might have noticed, right? One of the things to think about here is how you're using transitions. An introduction that frames the speech, a conclusion that wraps things up, and then the body points of the speech, right, that we've been talking about as sort of the overall organizational structure. One thing that I think can work really well and that you might consider incorporating into a later speech is physically moving as you're transitioning between your points. So maybe you have your introduction here, then you walk over here as you're giving a transition sentence into your body point, and then you walk back to the center as you're giving a conclusion. So this 1, 2, 3 style is one way that you can organize your speech, but be thinking about how you're making your transitions clear to your audience, because that can be one way to do it. The introductions that we give to a speech, right? Offering thank yous in the beginning of Megan's speech, the like awkwardness that she felt about using her hands and making a joke about that, right? Was something that was able to frame the speech, right? Taking our anxiety and making it something we think positively about. Oh, this person's anxious, but they're making it into a joke. They're self-aware, it's funny, right? Is one good way that you can use this. Expressing the feelings that you have, like, wow, I'm excited, I don't know what to say, right? Expressing that early on can be really useful. And again, we come into a speech feeling anxious and a little bit on edge, but speeches are a chance for us to ease into and channel those feelings that we have. When we use introductions, right, as we've noticed in these different examples, we're establishing our goodwill, we're establishing our credibility, and we're talking about why we're speaking. We noticed this in the first example in the ways that you all talked about this with thinking about hermit crabs, right, talking about the graduate's experience as a student, studying them and thinking about it in the context of her own life, right? Talking about her own background, her own experiences, and then putting that into perspective with the experiences of other students is something that you can do in an introduction effectively. We talked in class, including through outline examples, about how we can use an attention getter to get ourselves interested and engaged, how we can provide a thesis sentence that covers the main points in our speech, and how we can provide a roadmap that makes it clear what points we intend to cover. First, we'll be talking about my past, then we'll be talking about my present, right? There's other ways to do that by saying, you know, we can look at this both in the past and the present to understand this issue more broadly. So a lot of you used effective attention getters, and I wanted to provide some additional examples of attention getters that you could use in your speeches. Asking a question, some of you did this and even asked people to volunteer to raise their hands. Using a story or anecdote, right? Talking about your own experience, transferring from somewhere else as a way of talking about what brought you here. Giving a definition. Success is defined as da 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 da, and then using that definition to frame the speech can work. A quotation can sometimes be effective, but quotations can also risk going away from you and your speaking voice. An analogy, right? So in this case, something like a hermit crab was used as an analogy to the experience of breaking out of your shell, of trying something new. Using humor, as we noticed in Megan's speech, like using something funny or relatable to get us interested can be useful. Personal experience. I didn't know what to do. I was a child actor and I didn't really have the opportunity for additional roles, right? Talking about that personal experience and that acceptance speech worked well. In some speeches, you can give a demonstration. Perhaps you are really good at using a hula hoop and you decide to bring in a hula hoop to start your speech out and provide an interesting note to begin the speech. That might be a funny way that connects to your topic. You might ask people to raise their hands in something like a survey. A couple of you did that. And then you might give a quiz. How many people know the capital of Maryland, right? So that might be a way that you frame the speech as well. So there's not necessarily limited to these, but I did want to give you some ideas of how you could use attention getters and continue to use them. And perhaps you might try a different attention getter than what you did in the last speech to mix things up a bit. We've mentioned enumerations, the use of oral mental signposts that help us to understand, okay, next we'll be talking about my present, right? Using that clear internal organization in your speech and making it clear to the audience what you're covering can be useful as a strategy. That's especially important because as we've been talking about in class, we're more likely to remember the very beginning and very end of a speech. Typically the middle, some of that content gets a little bit fuzzy, right? So tell me what you're going to tell me what you told me, and using the introduction and conclusion to make the points you're giving in the speech clear is really useful, right? The use of internal previews within the speech can help for that too. We'll talk a little bit more about conclusions and how to conclude speeches effectively next class. But we did take some time to look at some example speeches of how to do celebratory speaking well. And I ask you to consider some of that as you're working on your own speeches and preparing for celebratory speeches at the end of this week and next week. We'll talk about delivery, style, and language a bit more in the next class to help you to prepare. Please make sure the names of all group members are on the group activity that you worked on. And please email or pass forward your group activity for attendance. Have a great rest of your morning. Enjoy the cold weather and see you all again on Wednesday.